why budgets don't work, why a lot of the traditional money advice doesn't actually work, and what you can literally do about this. So if we're just getting to know each other, if you're just meeting me, I've been working with people on their finances since 2013. And what I've historically found is that what works on paper, like what works on paper for the money, does not always work in real life. And it's not always work. It's like most of the time what works on paper doesn't work in real life. And I think the main issue with all of like the common wisdom around money and budgets and like all of the common sense, like the traditionally just accepted advice out there, is that it's based on what works on paper, right? And so, for example, I could look at somebody's numbers and be like, all right, well, these things look like they're not the priority. Okay, cool. Just stop going out to lunch and stop getting your nails done and stop doing, buy less lattes, right? And so that's easy to say. And it's easy for the mind to be like, yeah, okay, all right, lattes are the problem, right? And I'll tell you how many people I've talked to that are like, oh, I need to buy less coffee. And I'll also share with you that all of the people I've worked with, all of the money situations, I've read thousands, tens of thousands of pages of statements in my career, and I've literally never seen coffee be the thing that's like the difference, right? And so where I'm going with this is most of us have these ideas about what it takes, and it's all just based on what's best for the money. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work in real life. And I think our entire approach needs to change when it comes to our money, because we're actual human beings and money is the resources for us to build our life with. And so oftentimes doing the thing that's like the best for the money is often like not the truth of what we want. It's not the life that we want to build. And it really puts money above us in regards to how we prioritize our lives. And that's not the place. Like when money is ahead of you in your own set of priorities, like it's not a good spot to be. It's much, much better if you're building the life that you want to build and your money comes along for the ride. You make the money do the thing that it needs to do. We don't want to be in a position of submission when it comes to our money. And what that looks like is when I'm asking my money for permission to do the things, when I'm deciding what I'm going to do based on the money, not like, and there's a level of like realisticness to this. Like it all sounds a little magical, but I'm telling you, I've seen so many examples of somebody deciding that they're going to buy a house even before the decision made sense, and then they do it. They decide they're going to quit a job and start a business before the money made sense, and then it happens very, very quickly. So when you make the decision based on the truth of what you want, the money tends to, you tend to find the solution for the money, but it's generally the decision that's the catalyst. So, all right, so let me go over why budgets don't work and more or less what you can do about it. So the first reason that I will see budgets fail is that if you start with a blank sheet of paper and you write down where you want your money to go with no regard to where your money's been going, that budget is doomed to fail. And I say that because you have no idea what habits you have to change, where the money has to stop going, what that actually requires. You're just like, oh, I'm going to put my money here. And when we don't look at like, all right, well, that means I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do that. What ends up happening is you don't know what habits to actually change, and you didn't look far enough, right? And so that'll be a major reasons that budgets don't fail, because you didn't actually do the planning on like for the human. You just did a plan for the money, like I said. So one of the next reasons that I'll see budgets fail is more or less like the tracking system. So if I was to make a budget and I was not to build the system, right? So my entire business is built on a system that I call the invisible system, and it's a no budget system for household finances. And so when we just have a plan and we're just looking at our money and we're tracking our money and we're building out a spreadsheet and every month we update it and we do all these things, what ends up happening in real life is you don't always keep track of it. You miss a few days of tracking, you don't get back to it for a week or two, and you end up budget blind when it's time to actually spend the money. Like you'll remember so let's just say you were going to spend $1,000 on groceries this month. and now you haven't tracked in a couple weeks, so you know there's still some money in your budget, and you know you need groceries, and you're like, all right, well, I'm going to the store and I'll sort it out later. So you end up budget blind at the register. So that's another reason why budgets fail. Is so most of the people that I've worked with are pressed for time, they're pressed for energy, they're stretched, like they don't have a ton of extra mental energy. And so when they don't build out a system and they just do something that requires a lot of tracking, a lot of management, a lot of upkeep, they don't actually have the time or energy resources to invest consistently, and so their plan falls to shit. And so literally the work that I do with clients is we build out a system. It's called the invisible system. We set it up so that way we can get the technology, like, like automatic bank deposit, like direct deposits, automatic transfers, payments, you set up your payments in advance. Like, we automate as much of it as possible, but we have to get really, really clear on the numbers so that way I know how much I can spend. And then when the system is built, what it does is it really simplifies what numbers I need to pay attention to. So there's that. Another thing where budgets tend to fail is that people make them month by month, or paycheck by paycheck. And what that leads to is accidentally overspending. What we really has to happen is you have to look at your expenses over the course of a year, and sometimes sometimes it's even longer than that. So for example, things like snow tires, things like heating oil, taxes, there's certain kinds of expenses that we have that come up once a quarter, maybe even less than once a year, but they're not unexpected. Like, so for example, snow tires. So, when I go buy tires, it's like $1,000 purchase, right? And so I'm not going to budget for that in 2 weeks, right? It's like I have to have that money kind of available. And so what ends up happening is a lot of times when we're doing our budget in really small increments, we're looking at the things that we're going to need within that time frame, but we're missing the stuff that ends up on credit cards if we're not prepared for it. And so when I'm working with clients and we build out the invisible system, there's a whole account that's called working capital. And inside that account, we're putting money for the irregular expenses that are for sure expected, right? Like car repairs, like certain kinds of insurances that only get paid once a year, that sort of stuff. Then we're looking at like the foreseeable disasters, things like, my water heater's been making a noise for a couple of years, or hey, my roof is 3 years away from its 20-year lifespan. Let me start thinking about some of these things. Then we're also going to look for our irregular self-care, the stuff that's, a lot of my clients will go and they'll get their hair done every other month, and it will be a multi-$100 purchase. Or they'll go for massages, but not every single month. Maybe they go every other month. So, or travel, or girls' trips, things like that. And then also like family obligations. So I've worked with people who've got family in other states and they may need a plane ticket here and there. There's a lot of travel that's involved for weddings and funerals and things like that. And that needs to go, because like all of what I just talked about is all stuff that we can see coming. And so when we're prepared for what we can see coming, when we're really like looking for it, what ends up happening is the amount of stress comes down on our money. We end up feeling more prepared. And even if there's not enough money to necessarily like do all of it, it's a way, way better spot to be. And then it moves us from the position of emergencies to the position of like, oh yeah, I prepared for this. Like, oh yeah, I knew I was going to need snow tires, so I just started setting the money aside for it. And that's a really big shift in identity, right? So many people live from this place of like their money or their lack thereof is always smacking the shit out of them. Like they feel like, oh, I finally caught up, and then this thing happened. And I was like, yeah, girl, because it's winter and you needed heating oil. Like life didn't smack the shit out of you. You just weren't looking at anything other than like the immediate needs. And so that's another reason why a lot of times even people who are really paying a lot of attention to their budget still end up in credit card debt, because they're looking at it too small of a time frame. And so where I'm going with all of this is that when it comes to managing your money well, the major shift in perspective that I want to offer you, like the major insight that I want to give to you, is that we do not need, what you do not need is a plan for your money that only works on paper. Like, you need a plan for your life. You need a plan for your human being. Like, you need a plan for your habits, for your actions, for your desires, for the things that you want, the things that you're unwilling to negotiate, your standards, right? Like, a lot of times, like, the conventional money wisdom is like, lower your standards, right? Like, literally, I mean, Dave Ramsey's telling people to eat rice and beans, right? Somebody named Danny Johnson is telling people to eat bologna sandwiches until their debt is paid off. That is not an acceptable solution. Like, that's a lowering of standard. It moves a money problem to a health problem. I'm 40. I can't just be eating bologna, like in perpetuity until my finances are straight with it's a lot of this stuff is just so ridiculous. And these people get away with it because the shit it looks like it works on paper. This is not advice for human beings. It's just not. And I think that's like the major shift that's coming. Like, with all of the, the technology and all this stuff, like, we don't need money advice that only works on paper. We need money advice that works in our lives and that sort of thing. So anyways, that's my perspective that I would love to just offer you for today, because I think it lets us off the hook for a lot of mistakes that we made when our plans were not made for human beings, and they didn't account for human psychology, human decision making, human decision fatigue, the amount of time or energy, resources that you actually have to allocate. And it fucking pisses me off that then these smart, amazing people feel like they're bad at money because they took a shit ass plan that was doomed to fail, like, for a human to execute on. It actually, like, infuriates me. But I digress. And so anyways, if you are looking to get your financial situation straightened out and you want to work with me on it, and you want a plan that's going to work for, like, you and your life, I'd love to talk to you. In the description is a link to my calendar. You could talk to me and we can go from there. All right, I love you so much. I'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.